Mike Bohn here in Singapore for UFC 275, joined by the voice of the UFC, Mr. Jon Anik. You know him. John, how are we doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Beautiful country, obviously. We got the water behind us, and sort of weird navigating this official weigh-in at night with the first fight at 6:30 a.m. Sunday, but no place in the world I'd rather be right now.
Yeah, for sure. What do you have to do to kind of adjust to something like that? Do you stick on U.S. time as much as possible, or what have you done here?
So I've actually been taking naps, which isn't necessarily something that I'm able to do back home, but I've been leaning into it when I've been tired. I've been sleeping like 4 to 6 p.m. during the afternoon. So I'll try to sleep today before I head over for the ceremonial / official weigh-in. And obviously we have a Q&A with Jan Blachowicz and Robert Whitaker. And then I'm going to go to bed at 5 p.m. on Saturday, wake up at 2 a.m., try to run 5 miles, and call time is 5 a.m. on Sunday morning. Here we go.
Beautiful, yeah. And this card, obviously, the top of it, top heavy in terms of the top three, but we lost the Whitaker fight as well against Vittoria, but I think it's still a very strong event and everything. I guess maybe let's start at the top. Light heavyweight title fight. I mean, I don't think we ever knew that we'd be seeing a Glover Teixeira title defense at this point in his career, man. Like, for you, when you see this guy, is this all gravy at this point, or do you think for him, like, there's still more he can add in terms of, you know, he gets a title defense that elevates the legacy to an entirely different level?
I do think a title defense elevates the legacy of an undisputed champion, and I don't think that fact is lost on Glover Teixeira necessarily. But I do think there's a little bit to be said for this being gravy at this point in time. You know, to break through the way he did at 42 years old and cap that 6-fight winning streak by winning a title in what has long been the UFC's glamour division. Mission accomplished, you know, but he's not a guy that's resting on his laurels. I actually lived in Danbury, Connecticut for a time when I was working at ESPN. So I just went to Danbury last month and sat down with Glover. He was ready to fight in early April. I do think he's taken his strength and conditioning to a whole new level. He believes he has the best functional jiu-jitsu in all of mixed martial arts, and I'd be hard-pressed to disagree with him. So I think it's a fascinating stylistic matchup. I do believe if Glover successfully defends, he's going to try to have one more defense at Madison Square Garden before sort of riding off into the sunset, but I don't think you're going to see Glover more than twice more, and I do believe there's an outside chance if he does lose to Jiri Prochazka that he takes off the gloves and retires in the octagon Saturday night.
Interesting. He told us at media day he would never do that. He said, you know, but people say things all the time. I could see potentially that happening too. For him, though, it's, I mean, we'll get to Jiri in a sec, but for Glover, I mean, he's fighting a much younger man. I believe this is the biggest age disparity in a UFC title fight that doesn't involve Randy Couture or Yoel Romero. So, like, he's fighting a next generation type of dude. And for me, when we talk about legacy, if you're a guy like Glover, he beat guys that got into the sport before him. He beat guys that came in around the same time and up around the same time, and now guys that, you know, he was fighting before they even got into it. So to, like, beat a guy who's so much younger, I think that, you know, does a lot for the legacy too.
Well, and Jiri Prochazka is all the rage. He's a 2-to-1 betting favorite. There's so much hype on him, and I think rightfully so. So yes, it would be a huge feather in the cap of Glover Teixeira at 42 or 32 to beat him. I just think in a lot of respects Teixeira's style is ageless. I mean, yes, he's slowed down a little bit on the feet, but it was really a big left hand that he landed against Jan Blachowicz that was the beginning of the end for Jan. So I do believe Glover can realize success on the feet to eventually work his way into takedown range. It's just such a cool stylistic matchup because even though I think both guys have more ways to win than maybe the prevailing wisdom, it's very clear what both of them are going to be trying to do. And I think the biggest X factor for me is Prochazka's ability to stuff takedowns, especially early on. You know, his takedown defense developmentally figures to be a lot better than it was when he faced Dominic Reyes, but if I see any weakness in Jiri's game right now, I think it's takedown defense, and if anybody can test that, of course, it's the champ.
Yeah, and on Jiri, I mean, we don't see people fighting for a UFC title often in their third fight, and it's interesting for him, right, because he's a complete separation from the John Jones era, the Daniel Cormier era of this division, because he never fought either of those guys. So do you think, you know, him winning, is this almost a nice reset for the division too? We can move on completely from that era, and it's something completely different that's not associated to any of those guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think promotionally, Jiri Prochazka would be a great champion around which to build. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I find it interesting that Prochazka really could have been here earlier. Not unlike Israel Adesanya, the UFC went after these guys before they came to the UFC. I mean, Adesanya really wanted to make sure that he was ready to contend, and Prochazka very much cut from that same cloth. You know, he's a much different fighter than he was at 25 years old. Now he's 29 years of age. So yeah, I think it would be a changing of the guard, and I think it would inject some new blood into this division. But think Glover's going to have something to say about that Saturday.
Yeah, and I asked this question to your broadcast partner, Daniel Cormier, yesterday when we spoke. If Glover wins this fight and goes forward, you say maybe one more title defense, do you think the UFC would be disappointed if he retired with that belt? Because John Jones already vacated this title in the division. We've kind of moved on from that. We've had 2 new champions, and now if he left again, I think it would leave it in kind of a weird place.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but I feel like for Glover, he would probably, take that title defense money. I feel like he would probably retire on a loss, even if that extended his career to 3 or 4 fights instead of the 1 or 2 that I'm expecting. But you just never know. He was a little bit more tight-lipped with me than he has been this week, and not to say that he would actually physically go through the process of dropping down the gloves, but I find it hard to believe, were he to get knocked out by Jiri Prochazka in this fight, that he would want to come back and have one more fight, a non-title affair at Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden is his home arena. With respect to Minas Gerais, Glover Teixeira is massive in Connecticut, and he would have huge support fighting in New York. Of course, a lot of his early fights in the UFC did happen in Brazil. He hasn't competed there in some time. He wants to fight in New York City, and I think that would be the driving force for him were he to lose. But yeah, I'm hopeful that if he was the champion, he wouldn't vacate the throne, because that's obviously promotionally not ideal.
Yeah, I think he'll ride it till the wheels fall off, but we'll see. And then as far as the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos. Taila, obviously her record is phenomenal on paper, 19-1. Valentina, we know what she's done, extremely dominant. Taila's saying this week, though, that her and her team have found the holes in the game. She's found some flaws and everything. When you hear a fighter say this, is this like just something she has to tell herself? We know Valentina's as complete as it gets. When you're in Taila's position, do you have to say something like this to get yourself up to, give your chance of victory?
Yeah, I draw a lot of confidence from Taila Santos' body of work, right? 19 wins, just 1 professional loss. She's been married to the game for a long time. She has very much been a martial arts devotee for her entire life. So I would be more leaning into that for confidence than trying to handicap Valentina, because as far as weaknesses are concerned, my broadcast partners are largely UFC Hall of Famers, and if they aren't finding a weakness, I'd be surprised if my man Marcio Malco is able to find one, with all due respect. So I haven't seen anything resembling a weakness from Valentina Shevchenko. Yes, she starts slowly at times and maybe gets her reads and not playing with her food per se, but trying to sort of feel out things early on. But Taila Santos sort of is similar in that regard. She's not going to come in and, rush over to Valentina and throw a Superman punch to try to give her something to think about. Maybe she will. I would like to see Taila throw caution to the wind early on and throw sort of risk mitigation out the window, but I'm not sure that she's going to subscribe to that theory. But I think it's a fascinating fight. If our fighter meeting is any indication, Taila Santos is undeterred, so I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, it's nice to at least have someone with that level of confidence going in, so we'll see what happens. But as far as Valentina, change of tune for her this week. She's saying outright, I'm going to fight the winner of Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 2 at UFC 277. Is this for you a welcome change of tune? Because before, she's like, I just want to focus on the division, build my legacy, but we're 7 title defenses in this point if she wins it. Is this, in your opinion, the right time to make that move if she gets a win here?
Yes, and you're right to acknowledge that it has definitely been a pivot from Valentina Shevchenko. At times, she has sort of been dismissive of that as an obligation or something that the fans want. It's sort of interesting when you look at her in terms of the career retrospective. 2 of her first 5 fights in the UFC came against Amanda Nunes. They haven't fought in a long time. But I think for fans like me who maybe thought Shevchenko won that second meeting, as badly as I need to see Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson fight, I really need closure and finality on that particular series. But obviously, when Juliana Pena broke through, as she did last year, that opened the conversation for Valentina. Obviously, she has a head-to-head win against Pena. It happened in a main event. And that, I think, was the impetus and the jumping off point for Valentina to jump back into that conversation. Because as far as the size is concerned, Amanda Nunes is much bigger than Valentina. It's not as pronounced with Juliana Pena, but I do believe if Valentina holds serve as the favorite this weekend, that short of, I guess, Amanda beating Juliana and Juliana having trilogy language, I think you're going to see Valentina injected into that mix.
Yeah, it makes sense. And last but not least, we got the rematch of the fight of the year in 2020. Joanna Jedrzejczyk returns after 27 months against Zhang Weili. The thing that I find most interesting about this fight from Zhang's side is the first time around, she's on a 20-fight winning streak. She's unbeaten in the UFC, so much confidence, a champion, and now it's 2 losses in a row. Completely different scenario for her. When you look at that, do you think that comes into play at all? I wonder just where her confidence might be at right now.
Zhang Weili's confidence is off the charts, and I think a lot of it is rooted in the fact that she trained with her home team. And obviously, we all put Fight Ready on a pedestal, and rightfully so. Eddie Chan, Santino DeFranco, Henry Cejudo, all those guys. But I think she derived a lot of confidence from being around the voices that were in her ear throughout that 20-fight winning streak. She was in Thailand for the entire training camp, and physically, aesthetically, she looks to be in the best shape of her life. I find it interesting for Joanna Jedrzejczyk that had she won that fight, that first meeting, and by the way, I did think she won it.
Agreed.
How long would she have been away from the game? You know, I think there would have been some promotional pressure for her to defend that title. But she did say in our fighter meeting, I was going to take some time, win or lose, but certainly she wouldn't have taken 27 months. As far as the layoff for her, I don't worry about it. With other athletes, maybe I would. I don't worry about it with Joanna Jedrzejczyk. I'm just so excited for that fight. And I just was sort of blown away by Zhang Weili's confidence in our fighter meeting. Sometimes with the language barrier, things get lost in translation. She's ready to go. And I also think because of the nature of the Rose Namajunas-Carla Esparza fight, because it was such a stinker, I think both of these women are motivated to produce anything but that. So It should be good.
I mean, the bar is so high, though. Like, do you think is it even remotely possible? And there's only 3 rounds this time, so maybe that gives us, if it's even humanly possible, a higher output. I talked to Mike Brown yesterday, and he's like, that's what Joanna is going to do. It's going to be even bigger fireworks. I'm like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, I do like the fact that this fight is 3 rounds, and I know that is not at all the majority opinion. I know a lot of fans want to have those 25 minutes, but I do think you're going to see a Joanna Jedrzejczyk that can push the pace and the pressure and the volume even more so than she would over 25 minutes. When I asked her about 3 versus 5, I don't know what she told you. Yeah. She didn't really want to go down that path and say that it was easier, but Zhang Weili thinks that this fight's going to be even better, which I don't know how it is, but I'm very excited. And I do think it's going to be all action right out of the chute. You know, I don't think that there's going to be any deliberation or anything pedestrian about the start. I think they're going to meet in the middle and go after it.
Yeah, if they can somehow outdo the first fight, I mean, we are in for an absolute treat Sunday morning here in Singapore, Saturday night back home in the U.S. Anything else stand out to you on this card? For me, Andre Fialho, 3 fights in, I believe, 4 months, something like that. I think if he wins, he would be very near to the record for, most wins in a short amount of time, non-tournament.
Yeah.
Is he the one that stands out to you on the undercard, or is there someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly excited for the flyweights for Manel Kopp and Rogerio Bontorin, but yes, it's Andre Fialho, and Jake Matthews has a lot to prove in terms of getting back to his roots, just being aggressive and being a nasty prick in there. You know, that Jake Matthews hasn't been there over the last several fights, so I'm excited to see that. But there are a lot of men and women on this roster who would love to be in Andre Fialho's position, to be able to compete every month. You know, a lot of these athletes feel like they would thrive in that active schedule, but not all of these athletes are afforded that opportunity. Obviously, Dana White sees something special in Andre Fialho, accrued a lot of experience before he got to the UFC, and I think he deserves to be the favorite, but I think Jake Matthews is really going to bring the fight. You know, the magnitude of the opportunity for Jake is obviously not lost on him. He knows Fialho's all the rage. He's like the new Khamzat Chimaev in some respects, and Jake's ready to mute that noise this weekend. We'll see.
Going to be very interesting. This man will be on the mic with Daniel Cormier and Michael Bisping, a pair of UFC Hall of Famers there. Really appreciate the time, John, and it's going to be another great one.
Can't wait. UFC 275. Join us on pay-per-view. Let's go!